in Chicago since Donald Trump has now invaded that city. And this is what they want to say are the violent folks that are coming for ICE agents who are kidnapping people indiscriminately, just don't care about it.
On Saturday, Border Patrol shot a woman in Chicago. Here is the video of that incident. I'm going to read you the DHS statement and you tell me if they're lying. This morning, Border Patrol agents were conducting a routine patrol near the intersection of 39th Place and South Kedzie Avenue when they were attacked and rammed by vehicles and boxed in by 10 cars. Agents were unable to move their vehicle and exited the car. One of the drivers who rammed the law enforcement vehicle was armed with a semi-automatic weapon. Law enforcement was forced to deploy their weapons and fire defensive shots at an armed U.S. citizen who drove herself to the hospital to get care for wounds. From what I can tell, the woman who was shot is in this black vehicle. The big white truck is Border Patrol. Their press release reads like they were surrounded by cars, by 10 cars blocked in, being rammed by multiple vehicles. And then they had no choice but to get out to escape this encircling ambush and to open fire. There's only one car ramming anybody. The white Border Patrol truck was in the front. They could have driven away at any time. And the Border Patrol vehicle in the back, again, they drove into this other car. They want you to think it was an organized attack by 10 vehicles. It was one vehicle. The other vehicles are just normal people stuck there in construction traffic. DHS also says the shooting victim drove herself to the hospital. That's contradicted by the Chicago Fire Department, which says they picked her up about a mile away from where the shooting occurred. So they want us to believe that there was like a concerted ambush on DHS using multiple vehicles to ram them and box them in, and agents felt so threatened that they had to open fire, and yet they just let the people who rammed them and who they had to shoot, they just let them go.
This is why my starting point every time we talk about anything this administration does is that true? Because everything else you guys say is a lie. There's a story that they have as far as this whole confrontation with the ramming of a vehicle and an encircling of 10 other cars that are trying to kill all of these agents that are just trying to kill people. It's weird. You know, they're attacking people, but then when a confrontation happens, what they want to do is whine and complain about how they're being attacked while they have guns in people's faces. It gets a little bit more pointed and direct. This woman that they shot in the Chicago area and said she was ramming them and attacking them with a semi-automatic weapon, there's a little bit of a background behind her and them, and it's not a coincidence.
The armed woman was named in a CBP intelligence bulletin last week for doxing agents online. This is the most disturbing part of this story. They are monitoring activists. They are monitoring their online activities. They are building lists of these activists. That's secret police tactics. That's Gestapo tactics. Very interesting too that the Border Patrol agent that she supposedly doxed is seen on site of the shooting, where he later goes on to just blatantly assault another bystander who's doing nothing but standing there. StopIce.net and a couple other Instagram accounts exposed this agent earlier, and then DHS subpoenaed Meta to get their personal information. They said this was for a criminal investigation, all for releasing public information on this agent. So let me recap. DHS was circulating an internal memo that said keep an eye out on this activist because she released public information on this Border Patrol agent. Then a week later, the same activist that was in that intelligence bulletin gets shot by Border Patrol, and the same guy she was accused of doxing is on the scene, and then he is filmed assaulting another citizen.
So is all that a coincidence? That they've compiled a list of activists that they're upset about, that they said are doxing specific and certain ICE agents. One of those particular ICE agents was on the scene at this very point when they shot that same activist that they're upset about, and they've compiled a list on. Then he finds himself attacking someone else, completely exhibiting that he's an over-aggressive fascist asshole who's very happy to carry out orders of attacking American cities in cities like Chicago, where Donald Trump, his dad, has told them he's going to unleash more of them to attack American cities for some more training sessions because he hates this country because he's a traitor and there are his fascist foot soldiers. It's exactly how it works. And while they're carrying out these fascist orders, they sit in a corner and complain and cry about how they're being attacked. But I want to tell you guys the scene that happened afterwards as people caught wind of the illegal activity that these agents were carrying out in the city as they promised to do. And then the response that came Federal agents shot a woman in the Brighton Park neighborhood on Chicago's southwest side Saturday morning after they became boxed in by vehicles. Listen to this, the way that they cite them. According to the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, the woman, as well as the man whom authorities say was involved in the chaos, were facing charges Sunday. DHS originally said, DHS said the shooting happened while agents were patrolling Broadview, where the department has a U.S. U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement facility that's been the site of ongoing protests and clashes between agents and demonstrators. Here's more information, apparently from DHS and not from CBS News. The patrolling agents were rammed by vehicles and, quote, boxed in by 10 cars, according to a statement from the Department of Homeland Security Assistant Secretary. DHS said the agents were unable to move their vehicles and got out of the car. According to DHS officials, again, one of the drivers of a car boxing them in had a gun, which the agency said was a semi-automatic weapon. DHS said the agents opened fire, striking the driver, who they said is a woman. Afterwards, there was, of course, more protests. Americans are sick of this. All morning and into the afternoon Saturday, there were tense moments between agents and protesters with yelling, objects thrown, and officers spraying pepper balls. Groups of federal agents kept arriving on the scene. 4 to 5 undercover federal agents, SUVs, made their way through the crowd and go underneath tape. Each time they came through, protesters fought back. Here's a quote. If they're zooming through a crowd of protesters and they're doing it every 5 minutes to continue the irritation on people, it's almost like they want people to be provoked. At one point, a military vehicle pulled up near the protesters and an agent drew his gun from the roof, pointing at protesters below. Here's a quote again. Now, they got the SWAT truck here like we're the military now. This is like a war zone here. It's been the plan from the beginning. You agitate, you start violence, you point guns at people, you shoot some of them, claim that it's all their fault, and then when people actually fight back with self-defense, then it turns into this look at the chaos that's going on. Look at these radical Antifa terrorists. Last little bit here, just so you guys get the full scene of what was going on and how they decide to respond to it. Because don't want you guys to forget the kind of language, this violent, political, partisan rhetoric that Stephen Miller, Donald Trump, and the rest of them all use. This is where it all comes together. Christy Noem, she described the incident as really strange. And she alleged that before the shooting, a caravan of 10 vehicles was following the CBP agents and officers through the streets of Chicago. Here's her quote. They had followed them and gotten them cornered, pinned them down, and then our agents, when getting out of their cars, they tried to run them over and had semi-automatic handguns on them to where our agents had to protect themselves, and shots were fired at an individual, ended up in the hospital that was attacking these officers. Why didn't that individual end up right away in custody? But instead, she drove herself to the hospital. And then later they decided, look, we're going to have to arrest her because that's the only way our story is going to try and come together now. But they're so hardcore. They're so efficient. They would just let her roll. Last part. The woman who was shot was identified by DHS on Sunday as Miramar Martinez. DHS officials referred to Martinez and the other protesters involved in the incident as domestic terrorists. The same thing that Stephen Miller referred to judges, the same thing they refer to as Democratic officials, the same thing they refer to as people that are protesting in the streets, the same thing they refer to as people who posted online about Charlie Kirk that they didn't like. Terrorists. And if you're old enough to remember when George W. Bush was in office, terrorists were what they called anybody to justify any of the illegal activities that they were doing internationally, over in Iraq, Afghanistan. But the thing is, now the terrorists are here, named by this same administration that scrubbed unsuccessfully, scrubbed information about who actual domestic terrorists are. Regularly, continually, and in the future are right-wing domestic terrorists that follow Donald Trump, that have sparked all the biggest violent protests and attacks on the country in recent years, have been Donald Trump's terrorists. So I guess they think the best way to avoid people realizing that they're the terrorists is to just call everyone else that, and then let Stephen Miller's egghead ass talk about how they're the problem.